Ethylene oxide.
Is ethylene oxide.
Ethylene oxide.
Ethylene oxide.
Ethylene oxide.
Everywhere is just ethylene oxide. But what really happened? I thought I'd make a video. Keep watching. $11.4 million tons in production, 850 exporters, millions of small enterprises, skilled and unskilled labor, and exports of rupees 8,820 crores to destinations around the world. A 2 lakh crore worth Indian spices industry complements not just farming but also India's huge food business. These small food chains contribute immensely to Indian economy. Many use different raw materials including spices to their craft. None of them used cooking gloves or even safety hats. Sadly, one of these is a hotel management student. None of them cared about ethylene oxide in spices. Despite size of food and spice industry, public perception of food hygiene or safety is not very serious. A research agency found that barely 1 in 3 consumers were even concerned about the ethylene oxide fiasco. Many a times there's news of a dead rat, sometimes severed finger in ice cream, and even pests in food. Official data says unsafe food kills 4.5 lakh people every year. Common man can show ignorance to food hygiene, but the law essentially shouldn't. India has many laws to tackle food adulteration, but nothing like what China used to practice many centuries ago. You see, a criminal would be hung to death if adulterated food caused death. In India, in rare cases, it can get difficult for a food adulterer. For example, in Uttar Pradesh, it took a litigant 38 years to get relief. His crime? Well, he was selling turmeric which had 4 live worms in it. The big problem in the world's most populated country is not the absence of law, but how to enforce law. Policing often gets difficult considering the volume of people. Understaffed, therefore, is an apt word. Indian state FDAs are often understaffed. 3/4 of eateries in a city like Mumbai are usually dirty. Despite the opportunity to save their image, Indian brands mishandled the ethylene oxide crisis. James Burke, the CEO of Johnson & Johnson, who handled the Tylenol fiasco, would serve as a good lesson. In 1982, 7 people died consuming painkillers laced with potassium cyanide. James Lewis, the alleged killer, spent 12 years in jail despite not being guilty. An entire chapter is written in this book on how Burke, the Fortune Top 10 CEOs of all time, handled the case. Burke showed empathy and recalled the Tylenol-laced products.
Manufacture or sell any capsule products made directly available to the consumer. While this decision is a financial burden to us, it does not begin to compare to the loss suffered by the family and friends of Diane Ellsworth. On behalf of the entire Johnson & Johnson organization, I have expressed our heartfelt sympathy to Diane's family.
He was honored by US President Bill Clinton with the highest honor of Medal of Freedom for his work at Johnson & Johnson's Drug-Free America program. Unlike Burke, Indian brands have blamed China. Listen to the senior official blaming China.
भारतीय मसालों को बदनाम करने की अंतर्राष्ट्रीय साजिश जो हो रही है उसके बारे में हम आपको जानकारी देना चाहते हैं। मसालों में किसी भी प्रकार की कोई मिलावट नहीं है। अपने भारतीय मसाले स्पाइस ऑफ इंडिया जो प्रसिद्ध है, जो ज़्यादा कंपटीशन जो चाइना हमारे साथ कर रहा है, तो वो गलत फहमियां फैलाकर यहाँ का प्रोडक्ट बाहर कम जाए, इसके पीछे ये षड्यंत्र है।
Much to everyone's surprise, China has been a regular importer of spices. In fact, of all the products China imports from us, spices is among the top 10 products. history and data from Spices Board both confirm that India used to export a lot of spices to China. Financial year 24 data from Commerce Ministry also tells us that a record number of exports went to Asian markets. China, as of financial year 2024, gave India the highest orders for spices.
Shadyantra may seem irrational, but in business it is not. See, Vasco da Gama, the famous Portuguese sailor, got red carpet treatment upon his landing in Kerala. As part of trade negotiations, the Portuguese demanded the Zamorans or the Samudiris or the kings and feudal lords of Kerala to discontinue trade with Arabs and local merchants. The kings initially agreed, but chose to retaliate after the Portuguese stopped paying gold and silver gifts. Kunjali Marakkar, a warrior, fought valiantly to drive the Portuguese out. But the Portuguese managed to convince the Samudiris again by using classic tools of conspiracy and manipulation. Manipulation was also used by Virji Vora. Virji Vora or Baharji Bora was reckoned as the Ambani of the 17th century. Although he did not have royal blood nor his own ships, he used the techniques of manipulation, coercion, and even syndication. Ethylene oxide in food is not new. Some years ago, Indian mangoes were banned overseas owing to worms, usage of artificial ripeners, and even pesticides. In fact, the World Health Organization has been advocating and steadily publishing reports on discontinuing ethylene oxide as pesticides, and this has been ongoing for nearly 40 years. So why is ethylene oxide become a controversy now? Did the ethylene oxide come from farming? No. Were customers putting ethylene oxide in their spices? Certainly no. Did it come from packaging? Maybe. Essentially, we have switched to conspiracy because we don't have clear answers. Nobody has. So we all assume that it could be a case of a manufacturer who did not have funds to tackle costly hygiene processes. But we have ignored that it could also be a case of a business rival creating such an episode to acquire a profitable venture. MDH and Everest, for record, have turnovers in excess of rupees 500 crores. They are profitable, large assets. Besides that, if you scan the markets, you would find a dozen such indications. What I just said is certainly a conspiracy. Believable or not is something that you have to drop in the comments section.